political tensions, and economic vitality. Vietnam has continued to demonstrate resilience and deliver remarkable growth. And in this week's Baseline, we take a comprehensive look back at the key economic highlights that shaped the nation over the past year. But first, let's recap what made headlines in Vietnam's economy in 2025 in the following clip. "2025 will be remembered as a pivotal year for Vietnam's economy. The nation's gross domestic product is set to top 8% growth, placing Vietnam among the fastest-growing major economies worldwide. GDP is estimated at around $510 billion, moving the country into the upper middle income bracket, with per capita income approaching $5,000. Macro stability was maintained with controlled inflation and healthy fiscal balances.
Vietnam's export and import performance reached new heights in 2025. Total trade turnover officially hit $920 billion, making Vietnam one of the top 15 trading nations globally. A remarkable achievement given trade tensions and rising protectionism in major markets.
A key policy milestone was the implementation of Resolution 68, which repositioned the private sector as the primary engine of growth. New business registrations surged, buoyed by streamlined procedures and administrative reforms that eliminated nearly 3,000 compliance hurdles.
Credit expansion reached its highest level in 5 years. By late November, total outstanding credit exceeded 18.2 quadrillion dong, a 16.6% increase year-on-year, signaling robust capital mobilization and renewed economic demand.
"2025 was extraordinary for infrastructure. Construction and inaugurations of 564 major projects mobilized more than $193.8 million, with 75% of funding coming from the private sector. These projects will shape Vietnam's economic landscape for decades."
Major transport milestones, including the completion of over 3,188 kilometers of key expressways and the technical completion of the North and South Expressway corridor, achievements that exceed the original 5-year plan. Several airport expansions and the launch of key railways have boosted logistical capacity nationwide.
Across major urban centers, stalled projects were revitalized. Nearly 1,800 dormant development and real estate projects were addressed, unlocking more than $8 billion in investment and signaling renewed confidence in Vietnam's real estate market.
Vietnam's stock market enjoyed a breakthrough year. Most notably, FTSE Russell officially upgraded Vietnam's stock market from frontier market to secondary emerging market status. The VN index also reached an all-time high of 1,760 points. Capital markets attracted intensive investor interest and broader participation.
Domestic gold prices experienced extraordinary volatility, nearly doubling over the year, reflecting both investor sentiments and safe haven demand in the face of global economic uncertainties.
"2025 continued to be a highly successful year for Vietnam in attracting foreign direct investment, with total registered FDI reaching an estimated $42 to $45 billion, the highest level on record. Notably, dispersed FDI is estimated at $23 to $25 billion, underscoring the genuine confidence of foreign investors in Vietnam's business environment and its long-term growth prospect.
Digital transformation and innovation took center stage in regions. where digital economy initiatives expanded rapidly, transforming local governance and productivity.
It has been a year of economic resilience and transformation for Vietnam, with strong growth, structural reforms, and record-breaking outcomes across sectors. As we look to 2026, these developments lay a strong foundation for sustained progress. Now joining us is Peter Ryder, Executive Chairman of Indochina Capital, to help us decode the numbers and understand what they really mean for Vietnam's 2026 outlook. Thank you for joining our program today. Now, how would you characterize Vietnam's economic performance in 2025, and what were the most defining drivers of growth?
Let me begin by thanking you for having given me the opportunity to share my ideas, thoughts, opinions. I think it's been a very strong year, economically for Vietnam. Growth is going to come in at 8%, plus or minus, probably plus by just a little bit, which is an achievement in itself. And it has really been driven by several very important, elements or characteristics of the economy this year. First and foremost is the fact that foreign direct investment has continued at a very strong pace. I believe 2025, the figures are approximately, puts 2025 as the best FDI year in 5 years. In addition to that, export and imports has grown to over $900 billion for the first time ever. And we're going to wind up, I believe, with about a $21 billion trade surplus, okay? In addition to that, consumer spending has picked up quite nicely. Inflation has remained very much under control. Interest rates, the state bank, the financial system has had a very stable year. Interest rates have essentially stabilized for the whole year. And last but not least, the fact that the Vietnam stock market has been upgraded by FTSE, the FTSE Russell index, to emerging market status, something we've been waiting for a long time.
How did global headwinds such as geopolitical tensions, energy volatility, AI disruptions, or trade instability affect Vietnam this year?
Of course, they all affected Vietnam. But I think what we need to really focus on and realize is that despite, the global headwinds, despite the fact that you had an incredible disruption in the global trading system, in the global supply chain, Vietnam was able to manage, again, 8% growth and all of the other things I spoke about previously. And you have to really credit
enters a new phase of strong
development, and that's also wrapped up the citizen.
More of that now. Years, right? Of course, they all affected Vietnam. But I think what we need to really focus on and realize is that despite, the global headwinds, despite the fact that you had an incredible disruption in the global trading system, in the global supply chain, Vietnam was able to manage, again, 8% growth and all of the other things I spoke about previously. And you have to really credit I believe the Vietnamese government, policymakers and whatnot, for maintaining, just a very stable, I've used the word a couple of times, but just stability macroeconomic system.
In terms of FDI, one of the most notable developments has been major capital inflows into the semiconductors. And as of November this year, Vietnam's attracted 170 FDI projects worth nearly $11.6 billion in semiconductors. So how did this reflect Vietnam's ambitions and attractiveness in this field and the shift toward higher quality, technology-intensive investment?
Good question. I've been in Vietnam now for almost 34 years, right, since early 1992. And when I look back, right, at sort of what the economic drivers were then, and it was agriculture and a little construction, perhaps on the side, right? The fact that Vietnam has been able to climb, the ladder of manufacturing complexity and has really been able to raise its game and keep pace with global technological breakthroughs. I mean, the statistics, that you just cited as it relates to the semiconductor industry are emblematic, if you will, of exactly that climb up the value-added chain, right? I mean, again, you go back even 5 years ago, and it was furniture, toys, and other low-tech items that really dominated, shoes, textiles, et cetera, that really dominated Vietnam's trading output, okay? More and more of that now has been technologically, oriented, whether it be in semiconductor. I mean, obviously Vietnam getting, more and more involved in the new world of AI. It all adds up to a kind of a march, right, up the value-added chain.
Vietnam's stock market was officially upgraded to secondary emerging market status by FTSE Russell, a long-awaited recognition of the country's growing financial maturity and reform efforts. This recognition acknowledges Vietnam's efforts to improve capital market performance.
Represents another example of how the country's rising global profile can withstand near-term challenges. The new status recognizes years of coordinated efforts from the government, regulators, and market participants.
According to HSBC Global Investment Research, the potential international inflows could range from $3.4 to $10.4 billion from active and passive funds once Vietnam is fully included. This will mark a major boost for market liquidity and investor confidence.
So that is good for Vietnamese companies. It allows them to access different kinds of capital, mostly from professional investors. Becoming an emerging market will lead to a structurally lower cost of capital for Vietnamese equity and debt issuers.
Big institutional investors now have removed the entry barriers, and they can now freely, or much more freely, explore the Vietnamese investment market, which is bound to bring further investment funds to Vietnam.
While this is a significant milestone, experts urge ongoing development to secure long-term market stability.
Chúng ta được nâng hạng lên thị trường mới nổi hạng 2 của FTA cũng chỉ là cái bước ban đầu thôi. Và nếu mà chúng ta muốn nâng hạng lên những cái cấp bậc cao hơn và đặc biệt là nâng hạng theo MSCI thì chúng ta phải đạt được nhiều những cái tiêu chí hơn nữa. Và đặc biệt trong đấy có một cái tiêu chí hết sức quan trọng là liên quan đến cái room ngoại.
In addition, the wave of IPOs is expected to add further momentum to the stock market's growth.
Vietnam upgrade to a secondary emerging market by FTSE Russell. And how do you see this serving as a foundation for potential MSCI upgrade next year, and what does it mean for long-term sustainability of Vietnam's capital market?
As somebody who has long been involved in the world, the securities world, as I mentioned earlier, as an investment banker, and coming to Vietnam, and I remember coming, throughout the 1990s, The stock market didn't open until 2000. And I remember very clearly, initially it was 2 companies that were listed, and 2 months later, another 2 companies. And obviously the market, the securities industry here has grown, quite significantly. For Vietnam, again, to take it to the next level, it needs these upgrades. And the FTSE Russell upgrade, very important, okay? It will open the door to literally billions and billions of dollars of additional institutional investment into Vietnam's stock market, indirect investment. But of course, getting the MSCI, the Morgan Stanley, stamp of approval, will be even more critical. And, I think the government or the securities industry here, the authorities, the rules and regs related to it, everybody is working, hard and pulling on the same oars to make that happen, but going from FTSE Russell to MSCI, critical.
And how will this upgrade contribute to Vietnam's GDP growth momentum in 2026? Well,
look, the more investment eyes you have on a given economy, the better, right? And heretofore, 99% of the institutional investment market, which dominates investment in most parts of the world, Vietnam is still very much a retail-driven, investment, securities market, stock market, if you will. But again, to take it to the next stage, you've got to get institutional eyes on the market. FTSE, and ultimately MSCI, critical for that, as we've talked about. But again, when you've got institutional eyes on the market, that doesn't just affect the stock market. Okay, stock market is still a relatively small component of the overall economy here, but it will also, in the private equity sphere and other direct investments, other FDI-related opportunities, will expand quite significantly. So it will have a major impact.
Since the end of 2024, Vietnam has issued numerous policies that have fostered the country's economic development. Notably, in just 6 months, from December 2024 to May 2025, Vietnam enacted 4 breakthrough resolutions hailed as the 4 pillars of national development in the new era. They include Resolution 57 on breakthroughs in science technology development, innovation, and national digital transformation, Resolution 59 on international integration in the new context, Resolution 66 on reforming law building and enforcement to meet national advancement demand in the new era, and Resolution 68 on private sector development. They embody core ideological currents that shape Vietnam's institutions, influence economic thought, mobilize domestic resources, strengthen innovation, and define the nation's global standing.
Việt Nam đang có bước chuyển mình và đang có rất nhiều cơ chế chính sách để thu hút người tài từ nước ngoài về. Cụ thể như là những cái nghị quyết như là 57, 59 cũng đã là một làn sóng rất là mạnh tới tất cả các nhà nghiên cứu người Việt ở khắp nơi trên thế giới, từ Úc, từ Mỹ, từ châu Âu.
Another breakthrough in 2025 was the provincial mergers and the introduction of 2-tier local administration model. This has opened up greater development potential for localities. It also offers a more favorable business and investment environment with simplified procedures and a seamless administrative structure.
Sau cái quá trình tinh gọn bộ máy, phân cấp phân quyền, tạo cái cơ chế để cái chính quyền, các địa phương, các bộ ngành họ có trách nhiệm hơn, sáng tạo hơn, đúng không? Họ quyết liệt hơn.
I think for us, we see it as a major step forward for Vietnam. I think one of the things that we've gotten consistent feedback from, foreign investors in general and from our own experience is the layers of bureaucracy involved in getting approvals when you're working for certain projects from the provincial level to the district level down to the commune level. It can be quite cumbersome.
In addition, during the 10th session of the 15th National Assembly, its final sitting of the term, a large number of law bills and resolutions were passed. These measures created a legal foundation to drive strategic and economic development while improving the business and investment environment.
And if you were to choose one structural reform in 2025, what will have the most long-lasting impact, and what would it be?
Really, the streamlining of the bureaucracy of the government. I mean, it's been a combination of the combining of the provinces, the merging of the provinces, the elimination of the whole district level. The biggest challenge that I face as a foreign direct investor here, as Indochina Capital faces, is to work our way through kind of the mountain of approvals that one needs to start almost any kind of business. We're very active in industrial property. This is a very good example. And so we as a developer have to get a whole series of approvals before we can make our investment into an industrial park, right? And then on top of that, when we go to lease space, right, the tenants, the companies that we lease the space to, the manufacturers, then have to go through the same process. And it just takes a tremendous amount of time, and really detracts from being able to do business, being profitable, time is money, et cetera, et cetera. So I believe, the fact that the government has looked at that, I think, very seriously in 2025, already taken steps. I hope more steps, to, let's say, to thin out the bureaucracy, to streamline the government approval process is critical. But I also think the fact that the government now has clearly indicated that the private sector is a critical component of economic growth going forward. That as well is very important.
Now, throughout 2025, several breakthroughs policies were implemented, paving the way for different sectors to gain momentum. In particular, the Politburo's four-pillar resolutions have drawn significant attention. In your view, how have these resolutions translated into this year's strong performance, especially as 2025 marks a turning point for Vietnam entering a new development phase?
Well, we've kind of kicked this one around a couple of different ways already, but again, I would just focus on the two out of the four, right? That are, to me, the simplifying of the overall approval process, which has happened in part because the bureaucracy has been thinned down, narrowed, if you will. And two, just this emphasis on really promoting the private sector. In my mind, those are the two most important of these kind of the four pillars that you refer to.
Have you seen any significant development after the four pillars have been implemented? And what about other investors? What's their point of view in that?
Yeah, look, if you go back, say, 24 months, okay, so many projects. And again, I'm fundamentally a real estate developer. That's where I've focused my time and energy and capital and resources, partnerships, et cetera. So many projects were in limbo, kind of in what I'd call like never land, They'd applied for approvals, and for one reason or another, okay, nothing was happening, right? I could look an apartment that my wife bought in Ho Chi Minh City, for example. She was supposed to get the pink book, the title deed for the property several years ago. And just like nothing happened for 4 or 5 years. And then all of a sudden, boom, one day, kind of the door opened, right? And, she was able to get the pink book, right? And that happened for, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of property investors, condominium or villa purchase or whatever, and also to the companies doing the project. So a lot got unlocked. A lot started to happen. And as we all know, there's really been explosive growth in the residential real estate market over the last couple of years, unlocking a lot of pent-up demand.
The National Assembly has passed the resolution on the Socio-Economic Development Plan for 2026, identifying it as a year of special significance. It marks the first year of the 5-year plan for the 2026 to 2030 period as Vietnam enters a new phase of strong and sustainable development. Under the resolution, Vietnam aims for GDP growth of 10% or higher in 2026, with GDP per capita reaching $5,400 to $5,500. Meanwhile, inflation is targeted to be at around 4.5%. The government is also tasked with strengthening management of key markets, including gold, real estate, and securities, while stepping up efforts to prevent tax losses, particularly through e-commerce and retail. Public debt and the budget deficit will be kept under control to preserve fiscal space, while public investment disbursement is set to accelerate from early 2026, especially for major national projects. Looking ahead, the draft political report for the 14th National Party Congress targets average economic growth of at least 10% per year for the 2026 to 2030 period.
And what are your expectations for Vietnam's economic trajectory in 2026?
I'm hopeful that the reforms that have been initiated over the last kind of 12 to 18 months will continue to evolve and develop in the right direction. And, you know, I think, again, we touched on this a little bit earlier, the fact that, you know, Vietnam is moving up, you know, the value-added chain in terms of manufacturing and focus, you know, from an educational point of view, on high tech, on, you know, AI, is and will be, you know, absolutely critical. So, you know, I'm the eternal optimist, right? I always see the glass half full, not half empty, right? So I'm a big believer, and I'm a big believer in Vietnam and Vietnam's potential. So I do think that we will see, you know, steady progress in both those directions, which will add to the momentum created in 2025.
What reforms or policy shift do you consider most urgent for sustaining growth momentum?
You know, again, it's just making the approval process shorter and easier to deal with. Okay, you know, I understand that, you know, you want to keep away fraudulent investors. You don't want to wind up, you know, giving a group that doesn't have the capital to develop a big project, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, you know, a company such as ourselves, okay, which we've got a, you know, 25-year now plus track record in Vietnam, you know, we've always delivered, right? We've always, if we've said, boom, we want to build this, we've built it, you know, once we've gotten the license. So I think the powers that be should be a bit more reflective on that, you know. Maybe be a bit suspicious about those groups that are coming here for the first time, but those groups like ourselves and so many other, you know, big investors here, you know, open the door further.
Once again, thank you for your wonderful insight analysis.
Well, Brian, thank you very much.
2025 has been a year marked by fluctuations and global instabilities, yet Vietnam's economy has remained resilient, achieving remarkable results. Policy breakthroughs, together with collective efforts across sectors, are expected